This is a special Journey Map Rewind episode where we check back in with a past guest to see where the road has taken them. Haraldur Thorleifsson first joined us when Ueno was already turning heads. Now he's back, and the map looks a lot different. From freelance designer to founder of one of the most talked about agencies in tech, building for Google, Twitter, and others, Haraldur has never stayed in one lane for long. In this episode, we get into what's changed, what he's building now with Ramp Up, and how you run a creative life that spans design, tech, and philanthropy from, of all places, Iceland. Today on Journey Map, we are starting a very special journey of our own. We realized it has been 5 years since we brought back Journey Map in a meaningful way. And I started interviewing mostly agency owners. It was a passion project for myself in the pandemic. And our guest today was one of the original guests we had on kind of the rebooted version of Journey Map. We had a 2016 version as well. But in that pandemic era Journey Map, Haraldur Thorleifsson, founder of this agency Ueno, first appeared in 2020. I keep saying 5 years. I guess 6 years is actually much more accurate. That first episode, which we recorded in September 2020, covered his journey from freelance designer to founding Ueno, the origin story, growing from nothing, building a world-class agency. And it's where we're going to go today, I think, couldn't be a better tale of evolution of a person, of a business, of a professional in just a 6-year window. You know, I always was saying some episodes we would do back in 2020, 2021, I would say to people like, look forward to doing this again in the future. Well, now the future is here and we have started our own journey of doing it. So Halli, welcome back to Journey Map.
Thank you so much. Good to see you, Dave.
Too. Okay. I think it was the reason we invited you on the show in 2020, 2021. You know, we are quite selective. We don't just let anybody on this show. You know, you either have to have already done something pretty cool, or, you know, we feel that, you know, some agencies, small agency of the year, recognized personalities, et cetera, et cetera. And you very much fell into that category. So it's a bit of a validation moment for, I was going to say myself, but really for our producer, Emma, we selected you to be on the show being like, this guy seems like a pretty big deal, even though he's based in Iceland. And we got into the history of the founding of Ueno and, you know, you've done work before founding the agency. You had been an executive creative director for name every pretty big name tech company you can imagine, and you had done it. Just as a refresher for our audience, they don't have to go back and necessarily listen to that first episode, although I do recommend it. Give us the 60-second summary of, you know, how does one become the executive creative director to brands like Meta and others from sitting in Iceland?
It was, I think it's like everything else. It's every day you do something new to get you on the way you want to go. And so then when you look back, you're surprised. But at the moment when it's happening, it's just one day at a time. I think what I usually tell people, which is there's a chicken and egg problem with getting in the door at a big company, is once you're in, and assuming you manage to keep your reputation good, you're in and you are able to go to other people and repeat the same thing, because, you know, people really want someone they can trust to work with. And if they've seen someone do something at a scale that matches what they're doing somewhere else, then they will be more comfortable bringing you over. It's very tough to get your first gig, but that's where you just kind of have to hustle and get, I started doing very small design projects for Google, and those projects grew bigger and bigger. And Google was one of the first big ones that I was working with a lot. And over time, I got to manage bigger and bigger projects. And by when I was starting Ueno, it was, these projects were quite big and they had dozens of people working on them. And I could leverage that into other opportunities, both within Google and then other places.
And so was it always your, I won't say dream, that's cheesy, but did you intentionally seek out that type of product, creative tech industry work, or did it find you?
It was more sort of happenstance. I think it was more that those were the projects that were floating around. Those were the things that came to me. I think my aesthetic matched tech fairly well. I was working on a lot of, and Ueno has worked for, number of companies in and outside of tech, but tech has been, I think, the most prominent side of the work that we do. And it's sort of, with this, as with most things, you get a little bit typecast. Like your portfolio does drive the future of the work that comes to you. So if you've done a lot of work within a sector, there will be other people within that sector that come to you. So it was both that, and then branching off from there, we also have a lot of work in finance. For some reason, there's a lot of work in travel. For some reason, it's just that somebody trusted us in the beginning, and that created a new branch in the tree of the type of work that we can get.
So yeah, it is such an interesting story. I encourage everyone to go back and listen to the original episode, because it'll give all that background in much more detail. But thanks for humoring me to get everyone brought a little bit up to speed. Okay, so you are, I will say, the most enigmatic person I think maybe I've ever met, let alone had on this show. In that, again, when you understand the story, understand that what you've built, that you've done it from Iceland, it is a remarkable journey that you have been on. So to catch people up to speed, some big moments that happened since we recorded. About a year after we recorded, you sold the agency in kind of an acqui-hire structured deal to Twitter, now X, of course. Before we get into what happened, later, in that acquisition, how did this come together? Walk us through, because I'm not going to speculate on numbers, although there are some publicly available. It's reported as being the largest acquisition of an independent agency ever. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know. You don't have to even comment on that, but that's the speculation that is out there, which is just downright impressive for so many reasons. So what was it about Ueno at the time? Was Twitter already a client? What was the connection? How did that come together?
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky in timing. I set up the agency in 2014, and we, the office in San Francisco was started in 2015, and then New York 2016. And then by the nature of being in these places, we were working with a lot of big companies, and we were growing very fast, and hopefully that was a result of us being able to do good work. And very quickly, and this was a time, I think this is a little bit different today, but this was a time when there was a massive need for people, designers, developers, people that could work on like big product challenges. And we very early on, basically from within the first year, some of our clients started to reach out and sort of ask if we were interested in acquisition. And my objective at that time was to build something for the long haul, and I always said no, and flattering, but we sort of continued to work with them, but passed on the acquisition part. When I then started working with Twitter in early 2020, we had a pretty big sort of project. It was we actually had a joke on our website because we have worked with so many tech companies. The joke was that we worked with every tech company except Twitter, and we were across the street from Twitter, the office. And so the joke was like, call us Jack,
right?
Jack being Jack Dorsey. And then they called, and the first project was a pretty massive project to sort of reimagine what the Twitter basically at that time had two sides. One was the consumer side, which is like you using the app, and the other was the revenue side, is like how do they get money to run the company? And the first project was to reimagine the revenue side completely. And that project went really well. So well, in fact, in our sort of executive review meeting with the C-level executives, after that meeting, we got a call and they asked if they could acquire us. And again, I was still this was pre-pandemic, a few months before the pandemic. And I was still in the boat of, no, I'm building something for the long haul. So we passed. And then the pandemic came, and that year kind of changed everything. It was such a rough year. We went through this very deep valley of losing, I don't know, 50, 60, 70% of our clients, all our projects within the very short time frame. And then again, maybe a month or two later, all of those clients came back and double.
Yeah.
It's because everyone in the tech industry realized like we have a captive audience now. Let's capitalize. And so we just like we shrunk to about half the size, and then we quadrupled again.
Yeah.
Within 8 months, and it was just this wild ride, and I was exhausted and I was so tired. And so when the opportunity and the conversation with Twitter started again, and we were continuing to work, the next project was to reimagine really the consumer side, which is the app that people use. And I thought that there is, I've done this, I've worked on this agency now for almost 7 years. And even though I never intended to sell, there is something interesting about this collaboration and this time period where Twitter was, obviously still is, but was like this mover of reality within the world. Decisions that impacted everything from global economics to, small things were being influenced by Twitter. And I thought, well, we have this opportunity to help shape this. And I'm kind of done for now with the agency work. And so we went into Twitter as you mentioned, in an acqui-hire.
So you're there for 2 years. Talk about the work during those 2 years. What are you most proud of that came into that 2-year window that you were there for?
It was a very, very interesting time period because I had never been on the inside. Like, we've worked with every tech company under the sun, but I had never worked on the inside. And when you're on the outside, you have the benefit of we were often brought in by C-level people, like executives that gave us a broad remit, and we would be able to move very fast without all the internal politics. And then being on the inside is kind of the opposite. Like, Twitter at that time was, I think, a 6,000 person company. And with that come a lot of different priorities, different things that people care about. And it definitely was a new experience of how do you make impactful progress on a project. And I learned a lot, but it was definitely like everything kind of slowed down. I had been in the agency world and before that sort of freelancing for about 14 years. And I felt like this massive slowdown as I came in. And that took a while to adjust to. But on the flip side, we were able to see a lot of projects through. So the first project was to redesign, which was, fairly simple, but re-implement the edit button, which has been the most requested feature for a while. We created a bunch of new products like communities, which was a way for people on Twitter to meet and find their own people. We helped with the redesign of the app from both a visual and UX perspective. So there was a lot of different avenues and that we worked on. Members of the old Ueno team went in to help create the audio product. We worked on safety and the safety features. I think members of our team touched pretty much every single aspect. Not to say there were also a bunch of other great people inside of Twitter. But there was so much work. But I think for me, the big learning was not really the work because, I've been doing that for a long while. It was more about how do you make progress inside of a beast like this?
Yeah. So the story is very public. I actually don't want to spend a lot of time on it because people can go look it up. But basically, especially if you work in our space, tech or agency or somewhere in that spectrum, everyone knows what happened to Twitter. Elon Musk buys the company, goes in and, Doges before Doge is a thing, just basically terminates people, shuts off vendors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You were one of those affected people. Your story, not actually unique because many people had the same experience. You were in a bit of a unique position because not only were you terminated, obviously there's contractual considerations related to your acquisition. Again, we won't get into that for obvious reasons, but you were in a bit of a unique position. You're also a fairly well-known entity within certain circles too. So after not being able to email HR or, find out what's happened, your laptop's locked out, you go ironically on Twitter to basically say, hey, Elon, have I been fired? And what ensues is, what would now be, classified as a classic Elon, kind of ridiculous back and forth. Comical, being able to read it in hindsight, almost the back and forth. Obviously, when you're going through it, I'm sure it wasn't. You do find out that, yes, you've been terminated. And then obviously you had to go through the process of figuring out what that meant. So as you were going through it, what I wanted to focus on was as you were going through it, you got a lot of media attention. The BBC picked it up, many major media outlets picked it up. So was that the first time that you had ever experienced that kind of personal brand visibility on that kind of a global scale? And what did you do with it? Because you seem like a kind of person who probably did something with it. I'm guessing, something positive, but walk through what that whole, few weeks of your life was like.
Yes, it did. It was definitely, I live in Iceland. Iceland's a very small country. You don't have to do a lot to get a fair amount of attention here. And I have, I was used to being, to a degree, a public figure in Iceland. And I was already, on Twitter and had, a few, I don't know, 50,000 followers or something. So I was also used to getting some level of attention there. But this was definitely on a different scale. But I think because I had already gone through those two things, both in Iceland and on Twitter, it didn't really bother me that much. I kind of realized a long time ago that these things that happen in public they're not really reality. What you see happen in the media is not, it's sort of maybe a condensed version of reality, or like it's a slice of life or something. It's not really the thing. And so you can't really control it, but you can have a little bit of fun with it. And I was able to sort of, through that moment, settle things amicably with Twitter and Elon. And it was sort of a break for me from the acquisition, which was like already a big break from Ueno. And it was a way for me to move into other projects that I wanted to work on for a long time. And I had a lot of them lined up, and I was already working on some of them, but I was now free, both like I had financially access to, more money, and I was also like not as limited on time because I didn't have a full-time job. And so, and then with the media attention, I was also able to get attention on some projects that I wanted to focus on. And that was like, it was, but again, in hindsight, it was a very fortunate event that happened to me personally.
And that's kind of where I was going with it, and why I wanted to even tell that story, because what you seemingly were working on, it's a good example of why having those other projects kind of percolating or being active in the background, because you never know what's going to happen in life when you're going to get a stage or get an opportunity to speak to, hey, here's what I'm doing. And what you don't want to do is just like, I'm currently doing nothing. I'm dealing with lawyers who are dealing with this problem. Like, you want to be able to spin that. And that's obviously what you did. So I'll be very honest. One thing I did not know that you had dysphorinopathy. And when we had our first conversation, I mean, we're just sitting here, a couple guys having a conversation. So I did not know. Could you just give like a 30-second on what that is, how long you've been dealing with it? And then obviously I want to get into some of the projects you've been working on related to it.
So I have a genetic disease, which it's basically muscle dystrophy. And it is something, as it being genetic, that I was born with. I was diagnosed when I was 2 years old. My parents noticed that I wasn't developing, I wasn't able to walk as early as other kids, and I wasn't as strong. But I was, when I was a kid, I was on my feet and I was moving around. And then at about 25, I started using a wheelchair. And then, sort of around that time as well, some of my upper body strength started to diminish. And so I'm 49 now. So it's been almost like half my life that I've used a wheelchair, but living with this disease for most of my life.
Right. It obviously, again, only further adds to the impressiveness of your entire story. But you have created this nonprofit organization called Ramp Up, and built, at this point, I think over 2,000 wheelchair ramps across Iceland. You were able to raise more attention for Ramp Up through this Twitter saga that you went through as well. Why was there the need for a private nonprofit group to come in and tackle this mission? And, in a country that I think, like Canada and other countries in your region of the world, are kind of considered progressive when it comes to supporting disabled communities and so on and so forth. So why was it necessary to have Ramp Up be created in the first place?
I think there's no end to progress. There's no stage of civilization when it's finished. And we're always going to have aspects of our society that need improvement. I mean, I wish we were further along when it comes to accessibility, both in Iceland and globally, but we're not. And so I thought there is a chance here to make a difference. I have some money. I have some access to people. I have access to politicians and potential donors to a project like this. And I have a platform. And so I was able to sort of use that to build this entity that was called Ramp Up, which was, set up to build ramps first in Reykjavik and then across the country. And it was a very, very positive experience, because I think everyone kind of realized, as you were sort of hinting to, that this should have been solved maybe a long time ago, but nobody really knew how to solve it. And so they, I want to say 99.5% of all the people I reached out to see if they were interested in participating in whatever capacity said yes. And everyone, and Iceland is also a country that is great with these kind of, let's all do something together for a little while projects. And so it was set up first as a 1-year project, then as a 4-year project, very deliberately. And we had all the branding around it was very positive, and we had a lot of events, and it was kind of like everyone can get aboard. And I took a lot of cues from we just had Gay Pride here last Saturday here in Iceland, and then when I was a kid, gay people were definitely in like the dark ages here in Iceland. So in the span of like these 30, 40 years, there's been a tremendous difference, and it's been done through positivity and just like winning everyone over with this overwhelming joy, although there's deep hurt underneath. And it was kind of the same approach that we took. It was like, let's not focus on all the negatives. There's a lot of negative things here. Let's flip it and say, like, let's get everyone involved in making this positive change together.
Well, and a huge positive change you have made. So congratulations on everything with Ramp Up. How much of your time do you figure you spend? Because we're going to get into some of these other projects you also have on the go, and you have refounded the agency that's the big unveil of this episode. But how much of your time do you spend on Ramp Up these days?
It depends. The project in Iceland completed over a year ago. The original plan was to build 1,000 ramps. We built almost in 4 years. We built up almost 2,000 in 3 years. So we were very happy with that. Went well above what we set out to do. So the project in Iceland is completed, but the next phase was to see if we could take this model and export it to other places. So the next, like we're working on 2 projects now. One is in Ukraine, where we're building. The plan is to build again 1,000 ramps in 4 years, and obviously Ukraine is going through a lot right now, and there's a lot of people coming both from the battlefield, but also civilians injured at home that need to adapt to a new reality of having some kind of mobility issue. And so we're very fortunate to be able to find a lot of collaborators within Ukraine that are willing to work with us on improving accessibility for the vets and the civilians. And then more sort of coincidentally, we also started a similar project in Panama City in Panama, where we're building 200 ramps in that city over the next year, I think. And so to answer your question, it depends. There's ebbs and flows. Like, I go to Ukraine when I can, and it's, same with Panama, and there's administrative things that I have to do, and there is sort of more smoochy, like meeting with politicians that I have to do. But most of the actual work, the meaningful work, is done by people other than me that are extremely qualified and are very good at pushing this thing forward, and all the way down to obviously the actual people on the ground that are building the ramps, because that's a pretty big lift.
And Ramp Up, you have support from the Icelandic government, but also from Jack Dorsey, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously another testament to, I think, you as a person. Not only did you go through the Twitter acquisition, but maintain some pretty key and pretty high up relationships there. So congratulations on all that success. Now, with the 10 minutes or so we have left, I do just want to actually read something. Normally I would have read this at the intro, but I just wanted to get into it. You are the most polymath person we've had on this show. So entrepreneur, designer, musician, philanthropist, creative director. We already talked about selling Ueno to Twitter. You led Twitter's innovation team. You've done 2,000 plus ramps globally now. You also created a restaurant and a cinema in memory of your mother. You've co-founded a creative community hub in Reykjavik, and you're also a musician with an album on Bad Taste Records, and you have a podcast, which I'm sure is much more successful than this one. I am a pretty busy person, but like, how do you find the time? You also have children. How do you find the time? How do you prioritize? How do you manage your time? How do you deal with all these projects on the go at all times?
I think one of my sort of main strengths, and this took me a long time to figure out, is I'm good at finding good people to work with. And so when for a lot of these things, like you mentioned, for example, the creative community we set up here in Iceland, which now has about 600 members all working in, there's 2 different, like we have about, I think it's like, I think it's like 100,000 square feet of studios and sort of collaborative spaces. And for example, for that project, obviously there was a lot of work in the beginning, getting the funding, getting everything set up, finding the key people. The same as with the RAND project. Like once the projects are moving, like once they're really moving, I can sort of zoom out a lot and have these great people that are running these projects on the day-to-day, and they're the reason why all of this works. And then I have to I'm a bit of a control freak, so I have to control myself and decide what it is about these projects that I care most about, and then maybe I'll focus on that versus what are the things that I'm maybe not good at, or if maybe I would do something differently than someone else, but it's what they're doing. It's totally legitimate, and they can run it. Like you have to decide like how do you spend your time, what is it that you care about, and what is it that it's maybe best to let other people do. And it's a very humbling experience sometimes to come in as the boss or something, and come in and completely ruin something that was totally working before you came in and ruined it. And so it's I always have to sort of be careful about where do I push down, because it does kind of leave ripple effects that are unintended.
Iceland, for those who don't know, has a population of about 400,000 people, which makes the country about the size of the city of Halifax here in Canada, of which Halifax is considered the smallest of the major cities here in Canada, and that's the size of Iceland. You have paid the most personal income tax of anyone in Iceland in the last 3 years. You have all these projects on the go. You yourself on this interview have said you're a bit of a known personality within Iceland. What do you think is next on these projects? Do you have anything in the works that like is coming next? Like, I guess what I'm saying is like, it is interesting to have a position like yours where you can basically seemingly do whatever you want in terms of you can fund your own projects. You have the ears of the politicians. You are a known brand and entity. What do you think's next? Seem like there's got to be something.
Well, because I started a lot of projects in the maybe about a span of 2 or 3 years, and so a lot of them are now ongoing. And like I mentioned the RAM project that's going on in Ukraine. We have the creative hub communities. We just opened up a new space there, and so there's like these ongoing things within the existing projects. And we also set up a bank a couple of years ago here in Iceland, and so we're working on sort of expanding that project. So there's a lot going on within the existing projects, but the main big thing, which is new and not new for me, is you mentioned it before. I rebooted basically Ueno last year, like late last year, because it was a thing that I was exhausted by the end of it, but it was really a source of a lot of joy for me to work on these projects. And it's been fascinating to get back into it. And now with AI and everything changing the tech landscape, it's been really, really rewarding to get back into that work, which is kind of my kind of first love in the creative fields, which is mostly building brands and apps for, sometimes millions or hundreds of millions of people. And it's been really, really rewarding. And so that's the big thing that I'm spending most of my time on right now.
Can you disclose any clients you're actively working on since the reboot?
But we're working on with Expedia, for example, of reimagining what travel looks like in the age of AI. Working with DoorDash on mostly again AI projects. We worked with Bumble. We worked with Facebook. There's a lot of these older clients that are coming back. And so yeah, there's definitely there's a big need. There's this huge shift in how work is done and how people are using these products and what is actually possible and how fast it is possible. And so I do feel in some ways like the reason I got into this, which was, in the like first in the late 90s, which was it's kind of the internet was coming together. That was a really exciting time. Again, when the iPhone came, that was a really exciting time. And now with AI, I think there's another of these big moments that I think is probably eclipsing all of the other previous moments. And it's just fascinating to be on the inside in some capacity when something like this is happening.
Yeah, I agree. How many people have you recruited into the rebooted Ueno? And are those people who worked with you before and went over to Twitter, or are they net new? Like, what's the makeup looking like?
It's a mix. It's I over like the thing that I miss the most about Ueno, the old Ueno, was the team that we built. It was over a 7-year period. I had never managed a single person before I started Ueno and made a lot of mistakes, but over time that team grew into people that were able to tolerate my way of working. And by having, like, it's like a superpower when you have a team behind you that is unified and everyone is kind of driven towards the same goal. You're able to do so much work. And so there's ex-Ueno people, there's some new great people. So it's a mix of really, really smart people. I think with AI, there's new skills needed, and there's some older skills that are not as necessary as they used to be.
Yeah. Well, it is an exciting time to be in the agency world. It sounds like you are excited to be back in it. Welcome back. And I'm glad we could catch up. I said to our producer, Emma, before you jumped on, I was like, I define my last 5 or 6 years as being the most professionally chaotic period of my life. And then as I was reading your updated bio, I was like, I think he might have me beat. So congratulations for navigating, for taking a positive angle where other people may have, turn to darkness, and for all that you're doing in your local community and around the world. On behalf of us agency owners and operators, we need more people like Holly doing both great work and great things. So thanks for updating us on your journey, and we'll see you again in another 5 years.
Thanks so much. Great to see you, Dave.
Journey Map is hosted by me, Dave Hale, and produced by the website production company Craft&Crew. To learn more, visit us at craftandcrew.ca. Thanks for taking this journey with us.